Well, we are going to take a 60-minute yin practice that really focuses on the pelvis and the hips and all of the muscles and the fascia and all of the deep interconnective connective tissue around the pelvis. If you experience lower back pain, it's often due to, of course, there's things like injury and deterioration through age, but often tight hamstrings and instability around the pelvis can be a significant contributing factor. So we're going to really work around the pelvis. We're going to work into opening the hips through the lateral aspect of the hips, through the lower back and the hamstrings and the inner thighs as well. And throughout our whole practice in this beautiful, juicy hip opening sequence, I'm going to be reading out just at the beginning, and once we've settled into each pose, some beautiful, beautiful text. It's almost like poetry. When I first got my hands on this beautiful book, it's called the Radiance Sutras, 112 Gateways to the Yoga of Wonder and Delight by Lauren Roche. So I'm just going to open up to some of my favorites and read them for you for some space of quiet, introspective contemplation. So I do hope you enjoy. There are some really beautiful, beautiful words in here. So we're going to start to begin with in a seat. Take your sit bones elevated on a bolster or block. You will need all three props today. So you'll need a bolster, blocks, and a strap. I've just got my dressing gown cord, which is totally fine to use. It's going to perfectly do the job. So please just grab yourself something that you can use that will help to open up through the back of the hamstrings. We're going to take our feet flat on the floor in front of us. So we're taking kind of like a semi and sort of soft yogi squat. So the full yogi squat, and you're most welcome to take it if that's comfortable for you, is to have your bottom off the ground and no support, feet planted on the floor and your hips sinking down. But to ease into our practice, we're going to take a softer variation. So hips supported, feet on the floor in front of you, and let them be as far away from you as feels comfortable. So there's deep flexion happening through the hips. And then we're going to just simply rest the forearms on the knees. You can clasp your hands or just let them rest, whatever's comfortable. And we're going to gently lock the chin down to the chest. And we're going to start by breathing in. And we're going to work with an equal breath in the practice today. So allow yourself to just take a few breaths, breathing in and out. And then after we've settled into that, I'll take you through a gentle instruction to start looking at what rhythm of breath will be best for you throughout the whole practice. So as you nestle into that space where we're creating some deep stretch into the hip flexors, into the upper components of our hamstrings, which attach into the bony prominences of our pelvis or our bottom. And just a very soft opening through the inner thighs. The intention of drawing the chin down towards the chest energetically is a way to help us to calm and stabilize the mind. As soon as we take the chin up and we do big breaths up into the chest, we are inviting distraction and a lot of effort and a lot of dialogue through the mind. And we can start to have the intention to slow and close that down by simply bringing the chin to the chest. And as you're breathing in that space, to start to gently observe and count the timing of the in-breath. Without me controlling or changing the breath at all, mine is a slow count of 4. Yours might be a fast count of 4, it might be a count of 3 or a count of 6 or 7. So just working with whatever rhythm of count works for you, and just watch and observe how the breath seamlessly comes in without changing it. And then you're going to match that timing on the exhale. So we call this pranayama samavriti, where the in-breath and the out-breath are in timing, in rhythm. If you're feeling like you really need to slow down the breath, then you're most welcome to have a gentle control of the breath. So you might want to really stretch the in-breath and the out-breath out for a longer count. Otherwise, just keeping the mind centered on the awareness of the breath as it naturally comes and goes. And after sitting here in this gentle or soft yogi squat, if it feels comfortable for you and you have the range of motion, you're going to bring your hands onto the floor so that your shoulders and your torso start to melt down in between the thighs. So it's just inviting a deeper flexion into the hips. Totally okay to allow the spine to round here. Keep the chin gently drawn towards the chest. If you're aiming for that and it's not quite accessible for you, taking the feet a little bit further away from you and a little bit wider might make that a little bit more accessible. And we're just going to stay here for another 10 breaths. So whenever you've finished your 10 breaths, just slowly bring your torso up so that your head and shoulders are stacked over the hips. Find alignment in the spine. And just take 1 or 2 centering breaths there, especially if you were folded quite deeply. And then heel to your feet together so that your knees, inner thighs, shins come together. And just take 1 or 2 breaths centered there with the hips in a more neutral and closed position. And then we're going to come and lay on our back. So as you come down onto your back, we're going to take a bolster underneath the knees. If you don't have a bolster, just using a couple of pillows will be fine. We're going to come into a soft variation of reclined butterfly pose. So we're using the bolster to support the knees. So the feet are flat on the floor, soles of the feet together, and then you open the knees out towards the sides. So you can do this without the bolster if you're really open in the hips, but this option of just having the support of the bolster will take away some of the effort, especially if you're really tight. I also find that having the bolster underneath the knees just alleviates and takes some of the pressure off the lower back as well. I'm naturally quite open through my hips, but this position doesn't feel great, particularly through my sacroiliac joint, the joint that joins the back of the pelvis into the sacrum. And so having this tiny little bit of flexion in my hips with the support of the bolster under my knees just alleviates any stickiness or tension through my lower back. You can have your hands wherever you feel comfortable, and just constantly follow that easeful breath equally in and out. I'm going to read to you the Radiance Sutras 109. Native of eternity, at home in infinity, breathing immortality. Let these words sing in every cell. Oceans of splendor, luminous energies of creation, pulsating everywhere, always. Hear these astounding words continually, each phrase an invocation. Let the sounds ripple through you. Resonate with the all-pervading hum of truth, and know every fleeting moment is supported by forever. Just taking one final breath here. And you're going to draw the knees back together and just hug your knees into the chest as a way to really anchor the back of the pelvis deep down into the floor. And then we're going to come up and over onto our hands and knees. So just moving over to your side gently if that feels best for you before you start to shift, or simply sitting straight up. And we're going to be working into quite a deep lunge to really open up through the front of the hips. You may like to have some blocks to support your hands here, especially if the range of motion in your hips is compromised. It will just provide some elevation and allow your arms to have longer extension. So we're going to bring our right foot forward and keep our left knee on the floor. If that's uncomfortable, you can fold your mat over so it doubles up for extra cushioning. Grab a pillow or a bolster underneath that left knee. And before you move forward into the depth of your lunge, you really want to pull the right hip back and the left hip forward so that your pelvis is neutral, and then you can drive forward in a symmetrical position. I like to keep my back foot on the toe. It just creates a little bit more stability in the foundation. And then only if it feels comfortable for you, you can either take your hands down to the floor if you're really open through the front of that left hip, or just because we're here for a few minutes and we don't need to go really deep into the stretch, I'm taking blocks underneath my hands for support. And you might like to find some gentle movement, really opening up and stretching and wiggling side to side. You'll find little nuances in that whole lower back, lower abdomen, hip region if you move and wiggle and stretch until you find a space that feels nice for you to rest. Giving yourself that time to nestle into the pose and then reconnect with the breath, equally breathing in and breathing out. This is one of the poses for me that the longer I stay here, the deeper I can go, just because the body feels safe to surrender and really open up. So if that happens for you, perhaps you're starting on blocks and then you want to get rid of the blocks. Perhaps you can go even deeper. Perhaps your elbows come down to blocks and you really start to hinge at that hip. Just playing around and shifting and moving and responding to the body with mindfulness. As I read to you Radiance Sutra 110, it's probably one of my favorites. It's really beautiful. The juggler with her spinning torches conjures dazzling wheels of fire. The magician taps his wand and suddenly a net of jewels sparkles in the darkness. What do we love in magic? Each gesture is a kind of jest, inviting us beyond itself into the deepest magic of all. God alone is. All that we see is the performance of the divine magician. Stand at the center of this wonder and breathe the wild serene. Just giving yourself 3 more breaths here. And to come out of your lunge, just press back so that your hips stack over the left knee so you can take away the stretch out of the front of the left hip. Pull the right knee back. If it's comfortable for you, we're going to come into just a gentle child's pose. So if you can sit back on your heels and then allow yourself to fold forward, just taking it really slow and gentle after that deep opening into the front of the left hip. It might feel a little bit unusual or a little bit sticky, just coming into a full flexion. And just give yourself a couple of breaths there. I'm just in a very soft child's pose. And then we'll come back up into your hands and knees, and we'll bring the left foot forward to take that to the opposite side. So pulling the left foot forward, right knee stays down on the floor. You can tuck the right toes under or not, totally up to you. Draw that left hip back, keeping the pelvis neutral, and then start to hinge forward, using as much or as little support under your hands as feels good for you. And then again, just finding some gentle movement and stretching into the body here. Perhaps wiggling your hips and your shoulders and your side body. Opening your chest, sending your hips back a little. Moving and stretching into all those little spaces. And then when you find a space that feels really nice for you to rest in, close down the eyes, lock into that equal breath, Samavriti, keeping the breath and energy and mind neutral and stable. Hopefully cultivating a calming abide, keeping the mind focused on the breath with some gentle inquiry and some gentle reflection through these beautiful sutras. This following one is an insight verse, 147 to 148, and it says, "Worship does not mean offering flowers. It means offering your heart to the vast mystery of the universe. It means letting your heart pulse with the life of the universe without thought and without reservation. It means being so in love that you are willing to dissolve and be recreated in every moment." You notice your body sinking and opening into the depth of the pose. Just allow yourself to fall in deeper if that's where your body's taking you. Second verse of that beautiful verse I just shared says that being transformed by even one of these practices, fullness of experience develops breath by breath. One day the desire of the self for the great self is consummated. Come ready for that moment. Final breath here. And then you'll gently shift your hips back so that your hips stack on top of the right knee. Bring the left foot back, come and sit down onto your heels. Take a moment resting back on your heels. And then just take a gentle forward fold into a child's pose, just resting your elbows down to the floor, chin down towards the chest, and just taking 3 belly breaths to center in and oppose that deep stretch into the front of the right hip. And then coming to lay on your back. Going to take your bolster underneath both knees. And just having your strap handy. So if you don't have a yoga strap, dressing gown, cord, a belt, even just a long sleeve t-shirt, anything that has length that you can hold on to as you wrap it around your foot will definitely do the job. So coming down onto your back to begin with, knees supported, just give yourself 3 or 4 big nourishing breaths there. And then we're going to come into a hamstring hammock on the right leg. So taking your strap around the ball of the right foot, really making sure it is across the ball and not through the instep. So you really want it to come across the base of those knuckles underneath your toes. And straightening out the legs. I'm just keeping the left leg supported by the bolster here. Really helps to keep the pelvis neutral and anchored down. Can also help to alleviate any stickiness in the lower back. If you do experience lower back tension and tightness, it can often be due to tight hamstrings. So this is a really valuable and important stretch, especially because the hamstring, all of these hamstring muscles attach into your sit bone, which is the very base of your pelvis in the ischial tuberosity. And so while the hamstrings are a huge part of the leg, they are deeply connected to the pelvis. It can often be why the pelvis has so much instability or pain syndromes. We want to really make sure we open up through the back of the legs. So here, kicking out through the heel. So you're really stretching out through the back line of the leg and keeping the knee as straight as possible. If you can't get your leg up to a 90-degree angle with the knee straight, that's okay. Just let the leg be wherever it is, but really make sure the leg is straight and kick out through the heel. So you might have your leg quite low. One of my beautiful students is forever working so hard into opening up the back of his hamstrings. It's just never quite going to get there. But he continues to show up and keep his legs really straight and really support him in his practice with, especially in forward folds, with deeply bending through the knees to protect his lower back. And often in a hamstring hammock, his leg is quite far away from him. Just finding the space that feels best to give yourself a nice stretch in the back of the leg. Deeply breathing, finding that equal breath seamlessly in and out. It can help to take some of the effort out of the arms and hands by creating a loop. If you have got a strap of some description or a belt, I've created a loop in my dressing gown cord, and then I can just lock my elbow into the base of that loop and just allow the arm to hang. So I'm not having to grip and hold so tight on the strap. Sutta number 27. Put attention into the luminous connections between the centers of the body where the mind loves to dissolve. Base of the spine and top of the head, genitals and heart, heart and throat, throat and forehead, forehead and crown of the skull. Enter that glowing net of light with a focus born of awe, and even your bones will know enlightenment. The end of your next breath, release your strap and slowly allow that right leg to come down to the bolster to meet your left. And take a moment to tune in and to observe and watch the differences in sensation in the right leg compared to the left. And then we'll take that to the opposite side. So taking your strap around the ball of your left foot, really anchoring out through that back line of the leg, so straightening out the knee, kicking out through the heel, drawing the toes down towards the face because the ankle is deeply flexed. And then finding the rhythm in your breath. Finding equal, easeful breath in and out. If you're naturally quite open through the back of the hamstrings, you might feel this stretch in a different place. Like for me, I'm actually feeling it more through my calf, sort of from the base of the back of my knee all the way down to my Achilles tendon attachment. I'm not really feeling any stretch in my left hamstring at all. It's always been quite flexible. My right, not so much, but It's okay if you're feeling the stretch in a different part of the body to what would normally be experienced. It would just be indicating tightness or openness in certain areas of the body. But from a fascial perspective, when a yin practice, we're really mostly working with the connective tissue, which is fascia that lines the muscles, the cells, the organs, all of our ligaments and tendons. And so it's okay if you're not really feeling the stretch in your hamstring, even though this is a hamstring stretch, because the fascial line at the back of the leg will be nourishing the entire back line of the leg. And so it's still really benefiting areas of the body, even if they're not feeling like they're on stretch. Sutra 59. Sitting on a soft seat or lying on your mat, experience the space below as offering no support. You are simply suspended, floating in space. Structures of the mind release. The reservoir of habits dissolves. In an instant, lifetimes of patterns vanish. I'm just taking 3 more breaths here. And then releasing your left leg down to the mat. And taking 5 centering breaths. Allowing the integration of the stretch on the left leg to take place. And then making your way up into a seat. I'm going to take the sit bones just slightly elevated here onto a bolster and come into a wide seated fold. So the reason why we're just taking a gentle elevation of the hips is so that it allows the pelvis to fall forward and take some of the slack out of the lower back, especially if you're quite tight in the hamstrings or the inner thighs. I'm then going to use my blocks underneath my elbows so I can just simply shift my weight forward. So keeping the spine straight, carefully not to really round and curl the spine here. So trying to keep the spine straight and then reaching forward, I'm taking my forearms supported on my blocks. And really you just want to shift forward into a space where you can just begin to feel a stretch in the inner thighs. If in an upright position you have a stretch here, you don't need to go anywhere else. The fascial network that we're working with here, as I was mentioning in the previous pose, will be hydrated and nourished just by having a really subtle experience of stretch. We don't have to go into a really deep forward fold or stretch here to gain the benefits of it. So once you find the space that feels best for you, if you're naturally super open through the pelvis and you don't need anything under your pelvis, then please take your bolster away if you wish. I just find that gentle elevation allows for a better position through the pelvis and this tilt through the pelvis, which also allows the spine to stay straighter. Allow the chin to fall down towards the chest. And deeply breathe in and out. Keeping the breath full and easy, equal in rhythm. Sutra number 83. Everyone knows there is me, and then there are all these others. This is common to all. Lovers know there is me, and the source of this me is ever mysterious. Lovers know each contact with another is a spark of the divine. Lovers move through this world, awake to intimacy, each touch a revelation, never to be repeated. And I think just as beautifully, Sutra 84 follows on this invitation into embodiment and intimacy and awareness of others, which I think for many and in the world at large is lacking. It says, extend your awareness into the bodies of other living beings. Feel what those others are feeling. Leave aside your body and its needs. Abandon being so local. Day by day, constrictions will loosen as you become attuned to the current of life flowing through us all. Slowly rising up out of this gentle fold. Draw the legs together. Just give them a little squeeze in Child of Universe, or Egg of Universe, this can be called as well. Just hugging your knees into your chest, engaging the inner thighs gently after being open and stretched out. And then we're going to come into a hip opener. I'm going to give you an option here. It just really depends on your range of motion in your hips. You may like to keep the hips elevated if you're super tight. The options are to come into box pose, which is quite a strong hip opener pose. To do that, we're going to take the right leg down onto the floor first. So a little bit like you're about to cross your legs, but you're going to keep your shin parallel to the edge of your mat. So my shin is directly aligned with the top of my mat. You can see my knee doesn't quite hit the floor here, and that's okay. Just make sure you lift up out of your hips. And then your left foot, you're going to pick up and cross over so that the ankle falls over the edge of the right knee and the left knee stacks over the right ankle. And so both of my shins are stacked on top of each other and they're both aligned with the edge of the mat. The weight of my left ankle resting on my right knee has allowed my right knee to come down to the floor. So there's a really big stretch into the lateral aspect of my right hip, and you can see my left knee is up off the ground. If this is completely inaccessible because you've had major hip surgery or you're just really incredibly tight around the sides of the hips, then I would invite you just to simply cross your legs. So just take an easy cross-legged position, and then if there's enough stretch on your hips, you can stay upright, or if you haven't got quite as deep a stretch, you can just take a gentle fold. You might even like to take a bolster on your lap and lean your elbows onto your bolster. Maybe you can come and lay down. Just finding whatever feels best for you. If you're taking an easy cross-legged position, please still take your right leg down first and then cross your left leg over top. And if you're taking box pose, just make sure that the left ankle is actually off the edge of the knee. What will want to happen because of tightness in the sides of the hip, this huge fascia on the side of the hip, it's called the tensor fascia latae, TFL, it's commonly known as the acronym for it. It's a very thick band of fascia that really stabilizes the sides of the pelvis, which is super important for all of our lateral movement and changing direction and spinning around. It's very stabilizing for the pelvis. So it needs to be really tight. And so I expect that you're feeling a pretty big sensation if you're at least attempting this. One way to make this a little bit more accessible is to lift your sit bones. The higher you go with your sit bones, the less pressure there is around through the base of the sides of the hips. We won't be here for too long, just another minute. So keeping the breath as fluid and as full as possible. And I'll read this beautiful sutra because it's a little bit ironic because there's not much comfortable about this pose. So I'll share this one with you. It's sutra number 55. Sit in any relaxed, comfortable pose. Experience the earth below as insubstantial, a pillow of air, air that is always vibrating. Minute particles in ecstatic motion. Poised here, no support below, no support above, no support for the hands or feet, no support for the mind. Be completely at peace. And slowly come out of that. And to do so, you can simply send your hands behind you, lean back, stretch your legs out. If you need to straighten them and give them a little wiggle jiggle, a little shake. And then we'll take it to the opposite side just for a couple of minutes. So if you kept your legs in an easy cross-legged position, left leg will go down first, right leg on top. That feels very strange for me because I always cross my legs the other way. And then you can stay upright or start to fold forward. Or you're taking your left leg down first, left shin parallel with the edge of your mat. Right leg, pick it up, sweep it over. Right ankle falls over the edge of the left knee. And then find peace in your seat. Eyes gently closed. Finding the rhythm of your breath. This is the last pose before we get to take a little rest. Sutra 51. Wherever, whenever you feel carried away, rejoicing in every breath, there is your meditation hall. Cherish these times of absorption, rocking the baby in the silence of the night, pouring water into a crystal glass, tending the logs in a crackling fire, sharing a meal with a circle of friends. Embrace these pleasures and know this is my true body. Nowhere is more holy than this. Right here is the sacred pilgrimage. Live in alertness for such a moment, as if it were your one meeting with the Creator. Final breath in and out. And releasing slowly and come and lay flat on your back in your final resting pose. Take a bolster underneath your knees. As you come onto your back, if you need to hug your knees into your chest or take any gentle movement through the legs or spine or hips, do whatever you need. And then find your resting pose. Legs outstretched, chin slightly drawn into the chest. Hands wherever you feel comfortable, allowing the breath to soften the body for these final few moments of the practice. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. And this final sutra for you, number 49. Tasting dark chocolate, a ripe apricot, a luscious elixir. Savor the expanding joy in your body. Nature is offering herself to you. How astonishing to realize this world can taste so good. When sipping some ambrosia, raise your glass, close your eyes, toast the universe. The sun and moon and earth danced together to bring you this delight. Receive the nectar on your tongue as a kiss of the divine. Taking a deep breath in. Allowing the breath to escape. And as you take your next in-breath, inviting some gentle movement into the body and rolling over to your side. Coming all the way up into a seat, drawing your hands to your heart, palm to palm, Anjali Mudra, an offering of oneness, of unity, of deep reverence and respect to self and the practice. As you take your final conscious breath in here in your practice, and letting all the breath go, as you bow your head to yourself and to one another. Namaste.